second last chat about our top picks that we've been working through for November. And today we're going to deal with the dreaded maths and science. And I thought that you could start because you've got a long history with Matthew C. And it's a very popular one for homeschoolers. So why don't you get us started about that?
Okay, well, I didn't always use Matthew C. I did use one other program at first and discovered that my child kept forgetting what they'd learned in previous years. Then we did a short season with Singapore Maths, which is a very good and popular maths program. So I'll just mention that briefly as well.
Yeah.
And while it is a world-renowned program and many homeschoolers use it, I found that it had two books, a textbook and a workbook. And with the particular child that I used it first, she was scatterbrained, and we either couldn't find the textbook or we couldn't find the workbook. And it just kind of drove me nuts. And then I heard about Matthew C. and I thought, well, let me try that program. And after I'd switched, I was just so much happier, and it worked. And then it worked with each child subsequently. And so that's why we ended up getting the whole thing, you know, the whole range. And so the reason I liked it is that there is a DVD. So I bring a maths expert into my house who explains new concepts to my children. And then there's a workbook, one workbook with everything in, and they can work through that lesson by lesson. And at the end of a couple of lessons, there's a test. And the test helps me to assess that they've mastered the work, and then they can move on to the next lesson. Oh, we have little creepers photobombing.
It's wonderful.
Anyway, yeah, so it's very self-explanatory. It was designed for home education with the understanding that a parent might not be an expert in maths, or they might have done maths a very long time ago. And so it teaches the kids, and you know, they can actually get on with their maths even without my help most of the time. I just step in if there's something they're struggling with. The teacher guide is a book that's there so that if you can't find your DVD one day, you can still read how to do these lessons. And the answer key is very thorough. It gives the complete calculation. So if you can't understand where you went wrong, you can go step by step and find the solution. So I just think it's everything that I want. Oh, and the most important thing I should have said first is that it's multi-sensory. So it appeals to a wide range of people. There's video. If you're an auditory learner, you're hearing it. There are manipulative blocks, so you can do things. Some kids need to really see it. That's why it's called Matthew C. So it uses a range of different senses to help children learn their maths. And my kids have never struggled as a result. And so that's why I'm confident to recommend it so highly to other families as well.
We had a season with Matthew C as well, just for one of my children who was really struggling with the concepts. Right toward the end, I think we did their pre-algebra, and it was a great year that we had with it. In the beginning stages, until I found my feet and found my home with Saxon, we also tried a year of Singapore. My situation was slightly different. I found that it moved very, very quickly into abstract mathematics, and it didn't give children enough foundation in the concrete side. And me, like I say on almost every live stream and recording that we do, I'm so totally rotten with maths that it was, I needed to have a real good foundation, and I didn't want to pass on how I felt about maths to my children. So what we did, sneakies in the back there, that's so funny. But so we settled on Saxon, and Saxon maths had a bit of a bad rap in the homeschooling community. People said it was boring and it was this and there was that. But I found that it came in the lower grades in particular with, again, like you're saying, the multi-sensory approach. It came with a lot of manipulatives, from all sorts of little teddy bear counters to tangrams, to learning how to work with fractions, making sandwiches, and lots of recipes in there. So that really, really appealed to me with the way that I like to learn, you know, being very hands-on and tactile. So that carried my children through until they either switched onto GED or onto Cambridge. And I found it also a very good transition into Cambridge. And like I said, for the one child that did needed a brush up on algebra before doing GED, Matthew C was great. So, I think maybe we should just touch on the major differences between the two. Is that Matthew C, you can maybe go into this more, is more immersion. It covers one topic for a much longer time, whereas Saxon is incremental. So it's basically like a spiral where you cover the same thing every year, but on a more in-depth level each year. So, it'll do all of the mathematical disciplines. So that's kind of our two top picks for that. And then now share about Life of Fred. So Life of Fred is new to me, and I was in a fortunate position to purchase the book connection from another homeschooling mom, not knowing anything about Life of Fred, but just knowing that it was popular with the homeschoolers, and I decided to try Life of Fred's way of doing things on myself. Just mentioned that I'm really bad with maths, and I thought that this would maybe help me. Oops, we've got another visitor. Gosh, well, at least they know that we're real moms with real children. Hey, Life of Fred is a small textbook. It's non-consumable, so you can use it again and again with your children. And it's a story of a young boy. He's 5 years old. It's a little bit of a silly story. He's a maths professor at a university, and he thinks about how to present mathematics to his students by things that come up in everyday life. And the way that it works is that you will read the story with your child. You will not only cover maths, you'll be thinking about the universe, and you'll be looking at English language, and you'll be looking at how he's going to deal with 30 dogs that he wants to adopt if he's got to feed them, and how much it's going to cost to feed them, and how many hours he's going to spend walking, and is it actually feasible? So that's kind of the scope of it. And then at the end of each chapter, you have 3 to 5 sums in your elementary grades, and then it moves up to a little bit more in the higher ones. And his point is that children will learn much more by doing 3 to 5 sums with a happy heart than having to fill in a page of sums. And it's really worked for me. So I've got all the way from I to J now, and starting to appreciate maths for what it is. I don't think I'll ever go and be a mathematician, but certainly getting a greater appreciation for maths. So that's our top picks: Matthew C, Life of Fred, Saxon maths, and then a little caveat about Singapore. Let's have a chat about science now that we've looked at maths. They do tend to go hand in hand. We both used Sonlight Science for a while. Why didn't you share about that?
Yeah, it was a great program when we first started. It was lovely that we got beautiful, colorful books. Mm-hmm. And what I really liked the most about the Sonlight was their Discover and Do DVDs, where you could watch somebody doing the practical science experiments, and then you also received a science kit with all the equipment and goodies that you needed to be able to set those experiments up in your home and do them yourself. And the kids really enjoyed that. They didn't actually do every single one. Sometimes just watching it being done was enough for them to learn how to do it. But then there were some that were really fun, where they had to make and do and build something or mix something, and those were lovely. But then we discovered Exploring Creation. Yes. And as followers of Charlotte Mason, I love the idea that you immerse your child in a topic and they learn about it in great detail. Yeah. And again, it's similar to the difference between Matthew C and Saxon. Mm. Sonlight had the spiral approach, where they introduced your children to lots of interesting topics, but just gave you little snippets of information about it, and then you learn more and more as they mature. With the Exploring Creation series, you learn in great depth and in great detail about something. And I just love that conversational style of the Exploring Creation books, where the author is talking to your children and sharing her passion for the subject, whereas other reference books included in the Sonlight program were more textbooky and impersonal. And so we started with botany first. It was, I think, still one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
We did astronomy. There's the swimming creatures, the flying creatures, and then land animals. And we've done all of them and really thoroughly enjoyed them. And we redoing them now. My younger son is loving the bird book. He just reads it like it's a book to read for pleasure because it's so interesting, and he happens to have an interest in animals. I will add that. But they've been a great investment. So I'll leave you to talk about the high school science.
Well, I just want to add, in terms of the primary school ones, they've now added health and nutrition. They've also put in earth science, so that's geography. And then we also did their human anatomy and their physics and chemistry books, all in the primary schools, because we started it so much younger with our last one that we were able to get them all in. With the older children, they didn't get them all in. But that astronomy book, we did that with him when he was 8 years old. And that book set him on a path, put his feet on a path of a passion and an interest in astronomy and space travel and rockets, which he still today at 20 years of age is pursuing. And I think that the take home from everything that we always speak about is that you don't know what is going to grip your children. You've just mentioned how your youngest has been gripped by birds and animals. And if we narrow their curriculum down in their primary school years to reading, writing, mathematics, and reading some boring textbooks about history, geography, and science, you lose that depth and that what Charlotte Mason calls a broad liberal education. Not liberal as we interpret it today, but just give them all
generous
information. Yeah, generous curriculum. The Apologia elementary series, you also get an Apologia high school series. The general science is the first one in that, and they cover in detailed chunks, but all of the scientific disciplines. And in the years thereafter, Dr. J. Weil will take you into in-depth studies on physical geography or physics or chemistry or biology or marine biology. We actually did marine biology with one of our children. And again, the same thing, conversational, quite current. You know, he deals with current issues in our world. And the experiments, so also not being so good with maths, me following instructions for experiments used to just blow my brain. And the nice thing about these ones was that they weren't elaborate, and your children can actually do them themselves if you are dysfunctional with experiments like I was. And most of them worked. You know, there's nothing worse than setting up an experiment and then nothing happens. But these ones really worked. So we found those very, very exciting. Just one other one on that. Do you want to add on the high school, or shall I quickly just...
No, I think they were very, we did like 3 or 4 of them, and most of them were very good. There was one that one of my kids didn't enjoy chemistry and never finished it, but all the others were great hits. So, and
actually they've now got like notebooks that go with them, so your children can work in those, which is great.
Those are great for the primary grades especially.
Yeah, and they can record the experiments and everything. That just gives it another element in bringing in a writing base. Then the last thing that I thought that we should make a point of is that Charlotte Mason, in her primary school years, most of the science that was taught was learned by the children when they noticed things by themselves in a nature study environment, either when they're out and about walking and there is a question that comes into their thinking: why are the ants building their domes, you know, and people say it's because they actually anticipate that rain is coming. Or so there is that lovely aspect of get your children out, particularly in the primary school years, into nature, because that is where you see science happening right before your eyes. And in fact, would you like to do a little plug for our new program, our Footprints Nature Quest, because that fits in right there.
Well, soon to be published is the new Footprints Nature Quest, which is a literature-based program that takes you on a learning safari all around South Africa, visiting the different biomes that exist in our country. And I didn't even know it, but there are 9, right? 9 biomes in South Africa, and each one is different in its geology, its climate, its vegetation, the animals that live there. And so the idea is that you're going to read lovely living books about these places and then learn about this heritage that we have in our country. And hopefully will even inspire you to go to these places and see them and show your children and see this stuff for yourself. So it's an entree journey, but you could make it a real journey too.
Wow, that's the goal. That's the goal. Well, fantastic. Thanks for chatting, Shirls.